He forgets how to talk.
I'm a Crawford OG, by the way. Okay. So what happens to media and advertising? Society moves further away from God.
Gets less and less censored.
Okay, less and less censored. If we were to look, for instance, at ladies and immodesty from the 60s to 2010,
Oh, man.
is there a trend?
Yeah.
I'll show your ankle.
Same thing goes on, guys, with things like homosexuality. Same thing goes along with things like folks who would basically say abortion is okay. You know, as our society changes, so does the way we look at media and advertising. When you have an ethics that's defined by society, they basically say, hey, the standards are the norms against which society scrutinizes the behavior of both media practitioners and the institutions. Basically, they would like to be self-governing. But the problem is, I don't know how many of you guys have seen this website. It's called Newsbusters. It's kind of a neat site. It's, you know, something to check in on every once in a while. Basically, they're reporting primarily liberal media. I grabbed this screenshot. This is where CNN, they lowballed the Nevada Tea Party event. They said hundreds or at least dozens of people showed up to the Tea Party. The more realistic count was like 8,000 to 9,000. But by reporting of it at least dozens of people, how are they manipulating this?
They're shortchanging it.
Okay? Shortchanging it, but on a bigger picture, what are they doing?
Falsifying it.
Just say that
They're trying to affect our how much we're influenced by the Tea Party by basically saying, look, there wasn't really anybody there. You know, this was a non-event. This isn't something that our society's worried about. Question is, who are they really truly answering to? If I were to ask you, okay, we've got media, we've got NBC, ABC, CNN, we've got all of these different ads. There are 4 groups that you need to at least be aware of. They have a code of conduct. In fact, if you are a professional journalist, then you may belong to the Society of Professional Journalists that has basically a code that you are supposed to agree to before you can be a member of that particular practice. You have institutional codes. So, for instance, if you work at Turner Broadcasting or NBC, there may be codes there that you also are supposed to answer to. The omnibud system, basically you're to be seen as a person who acts as a trusted intermediary, kind of a non-biased intermediary, which that in and of itself is a joke, because we all have bias, even Christians. We come to the table with our own bias. You also have news councils. This would be where different agencies actually try to monitor each other. But remember, part of the bottom line of all this, guys, is ratings. Ratings are driving a lot of what we see today. Here's a question for you to consider. Are the media professionals bound to the same standard of moral conduct as citizens they serve?
Bound by who?
Well, would it be okay for them to lie?
No.
What if it was in the best interest of the public?
No, again, it's driven by ratings.
And which is
Why?
do they have to tell everything that they know?
Do they?
No.
Okay.
That doesn't
So,
necessarily mean they're being dishonest.
okay. All right, let's look for just a second. We call them gatekeepers. It's kind of one of the terms. Journalistic ethics have been codified in a journalistic as gatekeeper environment. Basically, the norms are designed to establish and maintain trust in the person and or institution guarding the gate. Because, guys, let's be honest, if NBC gets caught with its hand in the cookie jar of totally fabricating something, that is going to bring a lot of repute on NBC, and it's going to cause some of their viewers to either jump ship or to at least question anything else that they would put out there. So they've kind of got to balance the role of, okay, I'm to be trusted, but yet I also want ratings. Journalists themselves see their role as central to democracy, as providers of information that citizens need in order to be free and self-governing. Without ethical journalists in this view, democracy is ill-served because they would say misinformation or disinformation can and will be passed through the gate. So they view their roles as the gatekeeper. And in fact, they would say that without them in place, you're going to have a bunch of garbage getting through the gate. Now, the other side of the coin is they're controlling the gate. They get to determine what goes through. There may be a lot of news stories that you want to hear about that never get through that gate. So, for instance, let's look at a kind of a practical example. Should TV stations cover live car chases when the police are involved?
Should they?
What do you think?
No. Because then you have people who are going to want to be out on the street to see it. Because they'll see
Okay.
it.
What ultimately are they selling, or what are they trying to communicate there?
We're up to date.
Okay. What do you guys think? Dan, what do you think?
I think.
Oh, did you say Dean or Dan?
Dan.
Oh, I thought you said Dean.
I was like,
Go refer to you as Bush if you need to.
I don't know. I think they're trying to communicate that they're the top news provider in your area. And they get everything. They get there first before anybody else gets there.
Okay, is a speeding car, how much news is that really? Or is that sensationalism?
Well, I think I think they may be looking for the end result when there's like either a death in a wreck or maybe they're, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, the actual car chase may not be not the thing, but like when the police, you know what I'm saying? I don't.
Brad, I agree with you that it is sensationalism because naturally, I mean, we're going to get a thrill out of that. We get a thrill out of seeing that kind of thing in movies. We see it
Right.
live, it's going to be just as thrilling for the average viewer.
Which brings up this question, how much are we to blame? Because when you think about it, media, news is a form of media that we are, quote, buying or we are consuming. So could we not say that some of the blame for sensationalism, for sex, for all of the high-speed chases, those kinds of things, that falls at our feet because basically if we didn't watch it, would they put it on there?
No.
No, they wouldn't.
Guys, I promise you, right now, if you are paying any attention at all to what's going on with news media, you know that CNN is retooling, and they're retooling hard because their numbers are very, very low. And they're struggling, and they're trying to figure out what can we do to get our numbers up. The point being, if we don't watch their stuff, they're going to change. They're going to figure out a different approach. They're going to drop something or add something in order to try to pick up viewers. It's all about that mighty buck that we talked about on Tuesday. How do we train our minds, train the minds of our congregation not to to watch this kind of rubbish?
Philippians, I think it's 4:8. Talks about certain things that we should dwell on.
You speak, and it shall be printed.
It says,
Finally, brethren, whatsoever true, whatsoever honest, whatever pure, just, whatsoever things are lovely, good of report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Now, look at that verse and think about what is on the average evening news show. It's almost a direct 100% contradiction of what they show at night, because at night, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock news, they're showing you how many people were murdered, how many car wrecks there were, how many shootings there were, how, you know, all the, it's kind of like whatever's bad, whatever's dishonest, whatever politicians have cheated, whichever companies are going down, you know, it's basically the complete opposite of what is in this verse. So I guess let me ask you this question. Do we stand up in front of a congregation and tell them just totally turn off the news? Would that be a good thing?
what do you mean, like turn off reading the newspaper or something?
To basically say, look, you don't need to fill your minds with that.
I think it's probably better to say what we are to do, not what we are to avoid.
Okay?
If we stop doing something, we don't start doing this thing, eventually we go back to something else. And so it's a matter of prioritizing and putting these things first. It's just like making a choice of, you know, at least at my work, I can have a choice of studying God's Word, or I can go on the internet and read some article about sports. I mean,
Okay?
if I choose to look at sports, I'm not going to be focused on God's matters, and I'm not going to do His work. If I choose to study His Word, then I'll be more focused. So
Do you think that there is something to be said as far as being uninformed? Do you think we need to rear generations of congregations that basically don't know what's going on anywhere?
Hey, Brad,
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't buy into,
I know you don't think, but this verse says think on these things.
no, you're not understanding.
Hey, man,
It's not a matter of extremes. You can't say, okay, well, watch the news all the time, and you can't say, don't watch the news ever. Because
Okay.
as Christians, we have to be informed about what's going on around the world in our community and our culture, so we can combat that with the Bible. But at the same time, if somebody is talking about the new legislation that's going to be passed in Congress, I wouldn't have a problem with saying it's okay to watch that, because that can directly affect you. But if they're going to talk about some, sex scandal that happened the other day between an athlete and, something like the Tiger Woods thing, there's no need to watch that. There's nothing
Okay.
that can help you enhance your view of culture regarding that, really. Other than the
So
fact
then
that-
maybe part of our job as teachers and preachers is to help people understand there's a difference between being informed and being ignorant and just soaking up all kinds of news.
Yeah.
Either not watching any news, watching too much news, or being an appropriate consumer of media. Guys, I think that your generation is going to be one of the first generations of preachers who should actively be getting up in pulpits and actually saying, look, there are alternative news sources. It used to be basically all older people got their news from what we would call the major networks. But you know, as well as I know, that there are enough sources out there today that we can get educated on what's going on around us without ever having to see some of the sensational garbage that's out there. How about this one? What about user-generated content? How is that changing the landscape of what we consider to be news, and how does that change things ethically?
Talking about blogs and things of that nature now?
Blogs, comments. I mean, you look at how many, you go to like USA Today or to Fox News, most of them now will have comment sections or allow you to submit whether it be a picture or an article or whatever, so that there's more interaction between society and this news medium. How does that start changing things?
Well, it removes a layer of editorial control, which could be both good and bad.
Okay?
I also think it also leads people to go with more so popular opinion instead of facts. I mean, I think this is probably even true within the church. I mean, more people are going to be going by how people feel they should do things versus the way God would have us do them.
Because that's what the majority opinion is saying? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that even in the church, a lot of times our attitudes are basically, twisted according to what society deems as important or not important. We don't think of things from a biblical worldview, but more of a secular worldview. All right, let's put up another little ethical dilemma for a moment. This one may actually step on some toes. Is it ever ethical to Wi-Fi piggyback? Piggybacking refers to using an unsecured Wi-Fi network to access the internet. I see a couple of y'all right now going, oh man, why did he have to go there? What do you think?
You're stealing that service, and they're paying for it.
Yeah.
Okay?
So,
That's all you need to say. That's good.
But then you have those public Wi-Fis that are all right.
Okay?
because
So you pull up to a Starbucks or a McDonald's, and they have free Wi-Fi.
right.
For their customers.
For their customers. So now we got to buy something. So maybe it's not really free, although they advertise it as free Wi-Fi. So do you really have to buy anything? Second, most of you guys probably live in an area where there's enough houses or apartments around you where you know deep down you can log on, and if you've got a wireless computer, it's picking up 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 different wireless routers in your building or in your neighborhood. Is it right for you to jump onto one of those?
No.
Okay? Again, let's look at the legality for just a minute. In the UK, it is illegal, and also in some states in the U.S., not many. People have actually been arrested, prosecuted for Wi-Fi piggybacking. In fact, 2007, Michigan man was arrested for using a cafe's free internet service regularly from his car. 2008, 16-year-old boy, UK, was arrested for using his neighbor's Wi-Fi by accident. I don't think it was really by accident, but hey. Does the appropriateness of Wi-Fi piggybacking change based on the type of network being used? In other words, does it matter if, let's say that you tap into a business versus somebody's home?
No. As long as that person's paying for it.
Okay? Does the type or the amount make a difference? Let's say, Dustin, let's say that you got a lectureship manuscript that is just phenomenal. And it is for the Spiritual Sword lectureship, and you've got a deadline. And that manuscript is due today at 5 o'clock. And you know you can't get to your house and get it sent out, but you can pull up to a nice neighborhood and log in and send it.
Doesn't make a difference. It's still wrong. Wrong is wrong, Brad.
Absolutely. We've talked about the fact that situation ethics do not exist for a Christian because it's either right or wrong. And if it's wrong to do it, it doesn't matter if Dustin is sending a lectureship manuscript or if he's viewing pornography. It's wrong, period.
What about if something that occurred as you could save someone's life by doing that? Would that change anything by doing that?
Rahab saved lives when she lied.
Give me an example of how you would save somebody's life.
I'm just.
Here we go. We can't
Because I can't imagine a life-saving Wi-Fi thing. I mean, maybe
CPR. Look it up.
Okay, if you're jacked out,
let's say the person
You're still in
didn't have a phone, and he had his laptop on him, and the lady, he doesn't know who the lady is, but she's having like some type of condition that her doctor knows about, and he goes online to figure out, how to possibly, email the person.
How would you
to contact him? I'm just saying he had a card on him. The lady's having some type of condition, and she can go online and email him and quite possibly figure it out. It emails back real quickly, and the lady, he somehow can figure out how to get the stuff to her, and something of that sort. I know it's going through loose, but I'm just saying.
Okay, here's my problem with it. In order for the whole scenario to happen, guys got to log in illegally, period. You know what I'm saying? So and
I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm just asking how would that change anything?
It comes back to what Dustin said. Wrong is always wrong, period. And, situation ethics are nice to think about, but the reality of it is, if that is somebody else's service that they're paying for, then it's wrong. Now, does that mean that if my wife's life was on the line that I would not consider using it and then asking for forgiveness later? That's a totally different subject. I don't know how it would ever happen that way, but the point is it right or wrong? And the answer would be it's wrong. When you think about new technology, things that are happening right now, guys, we're getting a lot smaller with cameras. You guys know that. You know that basically you can mount a camera just about anywhere. And in fact, in a lot of high schools, there are crafty young men who are putting cameras in females' bathrooms or whatever. You got instant coverage of just about everything, being able to alter images such as photos, video to fool even the experts. You got TV reenactments. You got checkbook journalism. All of these things are bringing about ethical dilemmas that realistically 15, 20 years ago weren't even really an issue at all. You've got new stuff now that basically, is it wrong for a news company to reenact something and try to broadcast it, making you think that that's the actual wreck or that's the actual whatever, but basically they're doing it because, hey, it's going to raise ratings. If we show this train hitting this car, even though we're reporting on a train wreck story where a guy gets killed, and we go out and stage one, is that right or is that wrong? All right, another little ethical dilemma. Facebook, YouTube, very, very, very hot right now. Should you get permission from a friend before uploading photos, videos containing that individual to your Facebook, YouTube, or another site?
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a strong yes. I've got an absolutely, in fact. Why?
Why?
Because, Dustin, did you get permission for all the pictures that are in photo albums of your house if I come over and start flipping through them?
In my house?
Did you get permission from people?
When I took the picture, obviously, if I took the picture, they had given me their permission to have their picture.
People in the background.
Okay, what?
And it's in the privacy of my own house. I'm not finding it on the internet either.
Okay. But with Facebook, you could argue that those are just your, quote, friends. So they're not posted up to everybody. What is the difference in me coming to your house and looking at a photo album versus looking at a photo album on your Facebook page?
I have to give you the photo album at my house. Or you have to come to my house to get it. Where on Facebook, anybody can go on there and without any kind of permission from me and look at it.
Not unless they're
No, they can't.
friends.
No, they can't.
They got to be friends with you.
You have to invite them as friends.
Yeah, but
I don't know if people switch to
preferences and so.
Yeah, you can make it all based on your
You can ask
permissions.
Still have to admit them.
Hey, Dustin,
yeah. Are you
do
laughing?
you have a Facebook account?
I do.
Okay, just checking. All right.
You're
Chuck, what do you
actually my
think?
friend, Brad.
You're my friend's favorite. So.
Brad, you're not my friend.
Chuck, what do you think, brother?
Nah, I'm just messing with you. But no, seriously. Like,
Bless your heart.
Do you feel like that you should have to get some kind of permission?
I think you should, but.
I need to go back and look at my pictures.
But I guess one question that I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate here is, once someone allows you to take their picture, isn't that them giving you permission?
That's what I said.
Well, that's what. See, I understand.
Hey, if you say, hey, I'm going to take a picture and post it on Facebook, and I say, okay.
I didn't understand Dustin. I didn't understand Dustin's argument a minute ago because he said if somebody allows you to take the picture and you put it in this photo album at your home, that's okay. But if they allow you to take your picture and you upload it, you know, realistically, one could argue that there's not a whole lot of difference between the two.
They gave you, if you say,
But there is a difference.
if you say, hey, I'm going to take your picture and post it on Facebook, and they say, okay, then they have just given you the right to put that on Facebook and upload it for people to see.
Okay?
There's
Hey.
that, and
Yeah.
then Dustin also mentioned the privacy issue. It's just like, Facebook is a public site, yes, anybody can access it, but a photo album in his own home is isolated to his home, whereas he said he would have to come to his house and ask to see it. Whereas opposed to Facebook, depending on the preferences you set on your page, anybody can access it.
Correct.
And that could be stalkers.
And I have a lot of the friends on my Facebook that can access photos, but why are they my friends? Did I meet them one time? Or are they friends of somebody else? Or, you know what I mean? It's a lot more of a public avenue than your home.
Okay, let's do a scenario here. Let's say that James Coker and I go out to a restaurant, and I'm sharing with him the fact that he's failing in his Christian ethics class at lunch, and he's wailing and moaning and gnashing his teeth, and he offers to buy my lunch because he thinks that's going to help his grade. So he goes up and he pays for the meal at the bar because that's where the cash register is. And I turn around and I shoot a picture of him standing at the bar. Then post that picture up on my Facebook page. And allow roughly 1,500 people to see it. What's the problem?
It's unethical.
You have 1,500 friends?
I don't know. I don't keep track, brother.
Well,
He's like, people know me. People know.
That might be it.
Obviously, he doesn't have friends, I got friends.
James Coker, what's the problem with that?
Well, it's not honest. You took
Okay.
the context and it painted me in the light that I shouldn't be painted in.
Okay. Guys, do you realize that if I did that in all jest, that could have a very serious effect on him getting a job in the future? Because if a group of elders is savvy enough to actually look up James Coker on Facebook, and I tag that photo, and it brings up that photo, and they see him standing at a bar with a cheesy grin, then, you know, if I'm an eldership, that may be one interview I don't even want to bring in. I may not even want to have him come and try out.
that's a good point.
Other thoughts, comments? Examples of individuals losing their job due to inappropriate or unprofessional online content. 2007, you got administrators viewing a MySpace profile photo of a Pennsylvania student teacher that was labeled drunken pirate. Florida substitute teacher was fired for including photos of tattoos on her back. Non-tenured Connecticut teacher's contract was not renewed because of his MySpace page contained content deemed inappropriate by the school. He was used to have what the school considered overly familiar contact with students. 2009, a UK teenager was fired from her job after commenting on her Facebook page that her job was boring.
So don't comment that Brad's class.
You got mobile phone cameras that are increasing the odds of being captured in a public or social event. You got posting of compromising photos or video of yourself or friend that can impact your college or your professional life. Once a photo or video is posted online, you lose control of it. And guys, some of this stuff is pretty serious because Like, for instance, I had an atheist show up at one of my seminars, and he whipped out one of his these digital cameras. He actually had the decency to come over and ask me, he said, can I show this on my page? And I said, the only way that I'm going to allow you permission is if you allow me to see every comment before it gets put up and approve of every comment. Basically, I was not giving him free rights of my material to put on his webpage. And so we kind of agreed to disagree, and he basically realized that he did not have the right to just put it up and then print anything he wanted to beside my comments. Because, again, once that gets out there, it's out there forever. And you can't really pull it back.
And he can edit it any way that he wants to, too.
Oh, absolutely. Take me out of context completely. I had one person who has quoted me as said something to the effect of, Brad Harrub said, evolution is true. Well, guys, if you've ever heard me speak, I use rhetorical questions and stuff all the time. It may have been a situation where I was quoting someone, Richard Dawkins says evolution is true. Well, all they grabbed was evolution is true. Brad Harrub said evolution is true. Totally out of context. Which brings us to this one. Accuracy and fairness. Do you think the press is accurate and fair?
No. Nope. None of them.
What does it mean to be accurate and fair?
Present both sides of the issue and show it in a factual manner.
Okay. How much of their own bias are they bringing to the table?
100%.
KJ, how much bias do you bring to the table when you go up in a pulpit?
I mean, I'm biased about certain issues, so.
Okay.
100%.
Absolutely. And guys, understand, we got a magazine we do here. It comes at it from a Christian perspective. We're presenting things from a biased view. I don't apologize for that, but it's one of those things. I know there's some things that we either are not going to cover or going to put a slant on because we're coming at it from a Christian perspective.
But the difference is you don't present it as not being biased.
Yeah, you're using that as your absolute for your judgment.
That's true. That is true. I mean, we're on the very front cover. It says something to the effect of current issues from a distinctly Christian perspective. What about crude language?
Fair and balanced, and that's not true.
How about crude language? If the crude language is a quote, should a journalist use the crude language?
No. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Well,
I agree. Again, it goes back to if it's wrong, it's always wrong.
And even
What about photos that are accurate but horribly graphic?
You can choose to publish them or not.
Yeah, the television
Like that.
stations, the television networks, they understand this because they quote people who use curse words and foul language all the time. And they know if those things or those words make it on the air, it's going to cost them money. So they go to great lengths to make sure that they can report that story without getting fined. And in the same way, with graphic imagery. So obviously, you don't, ethically or otherwise, have to sin in order to tell the truth.
Right. So in other words, and that's a good point, Chris, you don't have to violate God's law in order to communicate a truth. Mm-hmm. We don't have to violate Christian ethics to get stories out. What about this, guys? What about a news agency that purposefully takes things off of the news and stops showing them because they've decided that is better for your mental health? I realize the picture's on the screen pretty graphic, but here's the reality of it. We all know the Twin Towers fell. And about 3 months after they fell, there was a collaborative effort to get rid of this material off of the screen because they felt like that it would cause Americans to basically hate a certain segment of our society or a certain segment of the world. Basically, it would kind of cause us to hate radical Muslims. And so they purposefully pulled all of this material off, and if you pay attention, they don't show this stuff very much. I mean, you've really got to kind of look and dig for it. Is that right? Is that ethical? What's the rationale behind that?
Proselytizing.
What do you mean?
Women in safeguarding.
It's proselytizing, like you said, they're proselytizing according to their particular viewpoint. They don't want people to believe something other than what they believe. And if showing a particular image is going to weaken their position, and if they have the power to remove that image, and if they choose to exercise that power, that I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
But it doesn't change that image.
Of course not.
And that's one of those things, guys, where, you know, when people say a picture's worth 1,000 words, there's a lot to be said because you're not getting somebody else's interpretation. You're not getting their bias when you look at some of these images. Another one that some of you may have seen, this was from a fire escape photo in Boston. And the photographer just literally, it was one of those, place on fire, happens to be there, he's snapping away, he gets these shots. One of the quotes that came from that, Nora Ephron said, the real lesson of the Boston photographs is not the danger that editors will be forgetful of reader reaction, but that they'll continue to censor pictures of death precisely because of that reaction. Death happens to be one of life's main events. It's irresponsible, and more than that, inaccurate for newspapers to fail to show it. So you got two different groups. You got a group that would say, do not ever put that in the newspaper. And then you got somebody saying, no, wait a second, this is real, this is life. If we don't do it, then we're being irresponsible. What do you think?
I think that the media contradicts itself constantly.
Okay, I agree.
Meaning in the way, you know, you talked about earlier about the high-speed pursuits being videotaped. And I remember an instant in California watching a high-speed pursuit, and the guy got pulled over, ran out, and they turned on him, and they shot him right there on live news. And I remember that being a huge thing, and now they don't show live pursuits live. They tape them, and then they show them afterwards, so they can edit anything bad out. But then they go against that, and then they put out advertising that promotes cigarettes or promotes other things that will eventually lead to death or promote other unethical issues.
Again, are you beginning to see how the very core values of the news media itself has a lot to do with what we see? So, for instance, Turner Broadcasting is owned by a particular individual or a group of individuals. That group of individuals that own that news production company, they have a lot to say with what actually gets put before your eyes. And if they have an agenda, or if they are, let's say they're Christian or not Christian, that's going to play a lot in what you see. The images on the screen right now, guys, are exactly the same picture. Two different mainstream news magazines grabbed the picture differently. Question, can newspapers or photographers ever ethically digitally edit a news photo?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, by that, I mean ethically. I don't mean can they. We know they can. But should they, or can somebody, like, for instance, they darkened the Time magazine cover. Can I legitimately say that that is me just using creative license?
No.
Okay, what about editing out red eye?
Yeah, that's fine.
What makes that fine?
They're doing that on purpose to change your view of that guy on the magazine.
That's O.J. Simpson.
Okay? Many examples of airbrushed or composite photos being published in the news media. Some combine a person's head with another person's body. Some edited to remove or to add an individual object. Some are edited to make somebody more or less attractive. You would be surprised at how many times they will make eyes look a little more pointy or evil if they don't like a particular political group. All it takes is just a little bit of highlighting. National Press Photographers Association Code of Ethics states, editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic image's content and context. Some photographers believe that any editing of a news photograph is flat out dishonest, that you literally should not do any enhancing to those pictures. What is a ethical answer to this? That some companies actually are starting to do.
First, you have to ask permission of the person that you've taken the photograph of. Who was it? Sigourney Weaver or Jamie Lee Curtis? One of them. They got really upset, and now they don't want any of their pictures edited. So you have to ask the person if it's okay, and then you have to say that this picture has been edited.
Right, now that's what I was getting to, Chuck, was there are some magazines now that are actually admitting in there, but again, it's fine print, you have to look in the masthead, it'll say something to the effect of, this has been enhanced, or, they'll give some kind of wording to let you know that's not actually the image. You got, obviously, the 1994 O.J. Simpson Time Newsweek covers. I will show you the University of Washington cover where they actually cropped in a black student into the crowd to make their school's brochure look more diverse. So you got the actual picture, and then you got where they crop in a black guy. In the year 2000, Daily News printed a cover of Bill Clinton, Fidel Castro about to shake hands, which literally didn't take place. It was complete Photoshop. 2003, LA Times news photographer was fired after the photo they printed of soldiers in Iraq was discovered to be a composite, the same situation, but the composite was more compelling. I'll show you a picture of that. 07, Ohio newspaper reporter resigned after admitting he altered a photo. It was discovered that at least 79 photos submitted that year were digitally altered. One example, he added a basketball to a game shot. So, again, when we're looking at ethics, you've got a lot to think about now that we can do some of these things, especially in the digital age, that we can play and manipulate with photos. Basically, if you've got a decent photo program on your computer, you guys know you can do all kinds of things to pictures. How about this one? How many of you remember who Richard Jewell was? Some of you may not. How many of you remember the Atlanta Olympics? Okay. Remember there was a bombing incident there?
Yeah.
Richard Jewell was the guy who was basically raked over the coals and proven guilty before he was actually shown to be innocent. Why is that a big deal?
Because when the media starts telling us who's guilty and innocent, that's never good. Because then you don't have the
His reputation is shot. You're talking about what does the Bible say about a man's name?
It's better than wealth.
Absolutely. We're more than rubies. What about the Duke University lacrosse story? Somebody tell me what happened there.
Basically, there's a party at the lacrosse house, and I believe it was a stripper that was there, claimed that some members of the Duke lacrosse team sexually assaulted her.
And after lots and lots of research, what did they discover?
That didn't actually happen.
Okay. Now, back to this, and we touched on this for a second. Who should be held responsible?
The liar.
What do you mean? I don't get it. Everybody should be held responsible. I don't.
Who, if I listen to a news, if Brian Williams comes on TV and he tells me this story about Duke University lacrosse players raping this young lady, and then 4 weeks later we find out they're totally innocent. She wasn't even in the building. Their reputation is tainted literally for the rest of their lives. Who and what should be done?
Well, the person who was held primarily responsible was Nifong, the DA. Really, the media wasn't held accountable, except you had some media outlets, you know, there was crosstalk, because some media outlets said, oh, see, you guys were wrong, you accuse us, you know, these guys of being guilty, and, you know, and the other media outlets did something about somebody being racist or something.
Well, for one, the girl's wrong because she lied about what happened. Two, all of those, the misinformation that was spread, whoever started that and whoever portrayed that obviously is held accountable. And the people at the school who, there's some faculty members at the school that even came out and wrote articles about how the players were guilty, so they're held responsible. So those students should be able to sue the school, sue the news program, and sue the girl for damages.
How about this, guys? What is pack mentality?
It's what was experienced at the cross.
Yeah. Basically, where you get a group of journalists who sniff a good story, and all of a sudden they jump in together and they start absolutely tearing apart these people and really ruining their lives. I asked this question, should the media withhold information? There's a strong line between what we need to know and their freedom of the press. Because, for instance, Arthur Ashe, he died of AIDS. Do we need to know that he died of AIDS? Whereas C.K. McClatchy, he had AIDS, but that wasn't his cause of death. At what point do we get to say, wait a second, you've invaded somebody's privacy? That's not news. That's basically you butting into their private life. You got FDR with polio. Is that, and that's an interesting one, because now you got the President of the United States, who is the top public servant of our country, who's got polio. Do we have a right to know that, or is that his own privacy?
I think we could have a right. I mean, I think we do have a right to know if it impacts their ability to do their job. I can't say for sure how FDR's polio impacted his ability to do his job, but I think if it affects their performance in their job, maybe we do have a right to know.
Okay, so maybe in this particular instance, as we look through these names, we say, you know, public figures that are going to serve the public basically need to understand they may have a much broader open closet than the rest of us. But they have accepted that as a part of their role as a public servant.
Hey, Brad?
Whereas, yes, sir.
Wouldn't that also apply to athletes such as Arthur Ashe? He said that, he took on the role when he became a famous tennis player. At that point, he did, I don't know if he did advertisements or not, but any community fundraisers, anything like that about going out to the community, isn't that the same thing as kind of deciding that you're going to be a public servant, a politician? Because he was an advocate for tennis.
Now, I would say that's two totally different, because one, you are a public servant, you're serving the public. The other, you're playing a sport, making money, putting it in your pocket.
Brad, Tiger Woods, whether Tiger Woods was, whatever it was that he was doing, or this Jesse James character, I mean, did that impact your life at all?
No.
Did it affect the way that you or I or any of the rest of us were able to feel safe about driving home at night?
It did not affect me in the least, other than to just say that's more Hollywood.
Exactly, and that's the difference.
Couldn't the same thing be said though for a politician that cheats on his wife? I mean, did that affect you driving home at night? No.
Well, but is that politician making legislation that will affect your life?
Yeah. That's a difference.
Is that politician running on a ticket of family values? And so that shows some of their character as to, is this person really an honest politician who's got my best interest at heart?
There's no such thing as an honest politician that has your best interest at heart.
Yeah, but that's the president. I mean,
All right, let's talk about another situation. What about the Princess Diana conundrum? Weekly Sun newspaper ran a cover photo of Lady Di many, many years ago. Their circulation rose 20%. Owners and editors of that noticed every time they ran a Diana photo that the circulation jumped. Hence, she became a major media target. Because all of a sudden they realized, this woman, there's money here. Were all of those pictures really news stories?
Probably not.
No. Who would be a modern day Princess Diana conundrum?
Maybe Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Okay. So you got a couple of stars like Angelina. You got Brad Pitt.
Michael Jackson.
Britney Spears, maybe. Michael Jackson. Of course, Michael Jackson's not posing for too many pictures now.
Well, no, but there's Lady Diana.
No, that's what I'm saying. I was saying who are modern day examples of this. The question. So here's the problem, guys. Princess Diana became money for these people, literally.
Right.
Her very image became money. What happens when that overrides everything else? And so now we've got people who are stalking some of these people because they know if they get a picture and they can slap it on the cover, that's going to increase their sales. Again, is that ethical? I don't think so. There's no news content to it. It's not something, as Chris said, does it change my life when I go home at night? Is this? No. Yeah, I don't care if Britney Spears shaves her head or not. Deep down, I think that girl needs a lot of help, and I think somebody needs to convert her. Topic of editing versus censorship. Does an editor have the right to kill a story? Yes. Does the government have the right to make an editor kill a story?
No.
No. Because there we've just crossed the line of freedom of speech. Does the editor have a right to kill a story if it's purely bias? Because he doesn't want that story running. For instance, how many times have positive spins been put on the Muslim religion and negative spins been put on Christians?
Daily.
Quite a bit. So if you've got a news organization that is pro-Muslim or anti-Christian, is that right for them to have that right?
It's right for them to have the right to what?
To kill a story or to support a story?
The government or an editor?
An editor.
Absolutely, they should have that right. Moreover, they have that responsibility.
Okay, so if you've got a Muslim editor who's only going to print anti-Christian garbage,
And I'm sure Al Jazeera is hiring.
I would say you got to worry more about some of the stuff we got going on here rather than just Al Jazeera. How about this one, guys? We talked about it briefly. Dean, how much should the general public know when it comes to media in wartime?
How much should the general public know when it comes to media and wartime? Oh, goodness. I think they need to know as far as casualties that were sustained in that day, or if there was a victory in a certain province. But I don't necessarily think that they need to know that force recon, a platoon of force recon are, going after a high priority target at 01, at night with an embedded reporter, because that's classified stuff. That's stuff that even the littlest leak can lead to deaths of people, and that's why I'm against reporters being embedded with troops, because those guys always blab way too much.
Okay, but what if you've got a mom at home that wants to know what's going on?
Well,
with her baby.
Well, she doesn't know. She doesn't exactly have to know where her baby's at. She needs to know that there's a war going on and that people. I mean, if her son dies, she's going to know about it within 24 hours.
Okay.
She doesn't need to know necessarily where her son's at. She needs to know that her son's in Iraq or her son's in Afghanistan. But after that, she doesn't need to know that he is currently, roaming the streets of Fallujah at 2 o'clock in the morning, looking for, Haji Pop.
All right. Other thoughts or comments on that? Guys, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, quite simply, it comes down to national security, where we're not compromising the security of our country as far as what can be known through the media. Fortunately, that's pushed so much, so often. I think I was listening to NPR. I'm confessing here. I was listening to NPR this week about individuals who are wanting to know even what the CIA is doing with, I think it's drones, unmanned aircraft, as far as the casualties of those in Iraq and Iran or Afghanistan. But that's going beyond the know for anybody outside of the national security.
I'm going to put up a slideshow, and I'll go ahead and tell you up front, I didn't do this slideshow. But I do want us to look at a couple of slides from it, because I think they're actually pretty good. We're going to start with who are they responsible to, and they put up a pretty good. Make sure you guys can see this. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got the media companies there on the top left, who are somewhat accountable to shareholders, to the government, to other countries. You'll notice there's a one-way arrow going to society. There's a two-way arrow going to audience. We say, okay, you got the situation. What are their ethical standards? For instance, with the Natalie Holloway drowning incident. Basically, they're saying the guideline or moral rules about how professional communicators should behave is their basis for ethics. It is a self-regulation. In other words, they say we should just go by industry codes, by our own standards. We should be self-regulating. There are a lot of industries that like that. The problem is what happens if they don't regulate themselves. Ethical issues include accuracy in reporting, privacy for media subjects, fairness in presenting all sides, confidentiality of all sources, reporting suicides, outing homosexuals, depiction of sex and violence, perpetuation of stereotypes, responsibility for bread and circuses. Here you got a broadcast ethics. You got Don Imus, who was fired in April 2007, calling the Rutgers women basketball team a very nasty comment. We can ask the question, do we think that was appropriate or not? But the question is, all right, is there... You got a guy who basically picked up his show and went to satellite radio and was making lots and lots of money. How much is the audience and the financial thing bringing to the idea of ethics? And I think the bottom line is money is what's driving a whole lot of this thing. Because if the sponsors think, hey, this guy, he's using this kind of language, that's going to drive down this show where we're not going to have as many sponsors, then lo and behold, they're going to pull the plug. You got sensational marketing in the magazine world. I'm not going to stay here long, obviously. How far should a magazine go using sex to draw its audience? People don't have the same expectation about Cosmo's use of double quotes and facts. What about sensation in the magazine world? I mean, is it really honestly a news story that Tom Cruise jumped on a couch? I mean, in the grand scheme of that, or Madonna adopting a foreign child. Do you know how many adoptions happen every single day in the world? That's not really, guys, when you boil it down, that's not really a news story. That is very much a sensational kind of deal. How much celebrity news is really news? Here we've got an image that, let me back up. Sorry. You got to have Oprah.
No.
1992 National Geographic magazine cover was modified to move the pyramids closer together. Most people would never have caught that. The fact that you've got the Egyptian pyramids, real life, they're nowhere near that close. But they were able to superimpose them to make it look like that. How about this one? 1989. This is vintage, guys. TV Guide spliced the head of Oprah Winfrey onto the body of the actress Anne Margaret, taken from a 1979 publicity shot. The composite was created without permission of Winfrey or Anne Margaret, was detected, notice this, by Anne Margaret's fashion designer who recognized the dress.
You can tell that's fake.
How about this one, though? Let's do a little retouching. Composite photo of Martha Stewart's head on a model's body. In fact, if you turn to page 3 of that magazine, it says cover photo illustration by Michael Ealyns. The headshot was by Mark Brian Brown. So you got them staging a model, and then they superimpose Martha Stewart's head onto it. This one, this one is pretty impressive if you really think about it. You got Angelina and Brad, who Chuck was just talking about. Digital composite of actors Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. The picture of Pitt was taken in Anguilla, Caribbean island, 2005. Notice this. The picture of Angelina Jolie was taken in Virginia sometime in 2004. And yet it looks like they're literally walking on the beach together.
Amazing what Photoshop can do.
Page 8 is a disclaimer noting the image is a composite of 2 photographs. Composite was purchased from Big Pictures, London-based photography, for $500,000, guys.
5 minutes on Photoshop, you get $500,000.
Pretty big money. These are actually done by a lady by the name of Allison Jackson, who is well known for her fake pictures. If you look carefully, every single one of these are fakes. You've got George Bush on the commode. You've got Angelina and Brad, supposedly. All of those are fake. This is what I was talking about on retouching. The original is at the bottom. Notice her eyes at the top.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
After receiving complaints from the readers, photograph was removed from USA Today's site. Notice what they say. Photos published online are routinely cropped for size and adjusted for brightness and sharpness to optimize their appearance. In this case, after sharpening the photo for clarity, the editor brightened a portion of Rice's face, giving her eyes an unnatural appearance. This resulted in a distortion of original, not in keeping with our editorial standards. And they can say it like was an unnatural appearance, but she looks like the devil in that top picture.
Ass queen. She looks like that. Ice queen.
Oh.
Here's a little bit of retouching done. In the year 2006, you see the original photo.
Yeah.
Photo to the left. What's the difference?
I lost a little weight.
He lost about 25 pounds.
Wow.
This was a retouch done with Marie Claire magazine, Elizabeth Vargas. Basically, they took a nursing person and her headshot and put the two together. Here's the Wisconsin college thing that I was talking about. If you look at the bottom left, guys, that's the original photo. Now look at the right, and look to the left of the girl in the white. They wanted to appear more diverse, and so they just literally added somebody in order to do that. How about this one? little White House retouching action. In the year 2000, White House releases a publicity photo which had been doctored to suggest a larger audience for the president. They eventually apologized and sent out the original to news audiences.
That's sad. That's sad when you gotta make up your own audience.
That's called a
We've already looked at this one. Same picture. Time darkened theirs. 2007, Time magazine made old Ronnie cry. They added the tear. The question is, should they be able to do that? I mean, they would say that that is creative license. Here is a 2003 LA Times. This is, I think, the guy who got fired, Brian Walsky. Look at what they did. He basically took two different pictures, and he grabbed the soldier that's in the more aggressive pose out of one, dropped it into the other shot, kind of made it look like he's got his gun out ready for this dad and this child. Here you've got a retouching by Reuters where they added more smoke. In fact, if you look carefully at the picture on the right, you'll see these real distinct circular things in the smoke. That's pretty classic from Photoshop.
That is poor Photoshop right there.
That is very poor Photoshop. But it ran. We're not going to worry about what they would say. Let's keep going here. Let's start right here for just a second. Don't know how many of you guys know about the Plame affair. Louis Scooter Libby Jr., former Chief of Staff, Assistant for National Security Affairs to U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney, Presidential Advisor. 2003-2004, intense speculation about Libby centered on the possibility that he may have been the one who outed Valerie Plame, CIA covert operative whose identity was classified. So you got Scooter Libby in trouble. July of 2005, Time magazine reporter Matthew Cooper revealed that Libby and Karl Rove were the first to disclose Wilson's wife had offered up Wilson's name on a mission to Niger and that she and a CIA officer without mentioning her name. American Prospect magazine revealed in August of 2005 that Libby had testified that he met with Judith Miller July the 8th, 2003, discussed Wilson's wife and with her at that time. It was later learned Miller's notes indicated the name Flame rather than Plame. Miller was jailed July the 7th, 2005 for contempt of court after refusing to testify to the grand jury about this meeting despite a signed blanket waiver from Libby allowing journalists to discuss their conversations. Now it gets a little crazier. Libby, 55, is charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, for lying to the FBI and federal grand jury about how he learned about the CIA operative Valerie Plame and what he subsequently told reporters about her. Conservative columnist Robert Novak named her in a column July 14, 2003, 8 days after Plame's husband, former U.S. Ambassador Joseph Wilson, alleged in an opinion piece in the New York Times that the Bush administration had twisted pre-war intelligence on Iraq to justify going to war. April of 2006, New York Times claimed that it was President Bush who ordered the leak to Miller. So, if you're following this for just a minute, let me back up. You got multiple people going to jail, and you got all kinds of confusion over who outed this person. When you go back originally, you see that realistically her husband had a lot to do with it earlier on, and that Robert Novak had basically named her in 2003. The point being, the media got it wrong, and it ended up putting some folks in jail. We look at, let's see. Reporter for a campus paper, student tells you that a professor gave him a better grade in exchange for sex. Let me back up. Student wants to remain anonymous because he is embarrassed about what he did. He says other students also exchange sex for grades. What do? Print the story, name the professor, name the student. What would you do?
Verify the facts.
Verify the facts. Okay, after you've proven the facts, you're a reporter. Do you print the story, name the professor, name the student? Oh, no, they didn't.
Yes, it did.
Is that any different from on the news when people want their faces blurred out?
Yeah, I mean, that would be similar to that. One of the questions, though, that we would want to ask, and this comes back to what Chris was trying to communicate earlier, is that story ethically newsworthy? And if so, what do we have to portray as far as truth? Is it going to be something that deep down folks need to know about, or are we just trying to sensationalize something? You know, if there really is a story there, can you report the story without focusing on the sex and the sensation? Okay, I realize, guys, we've covered a lot of different stuff. Two things I want you to kind of keep in the forefront of your mind. God has laid a standard as to how we should always be treating people, especially when doing business. And number two, ethically speaking, when it comes to ethical topics, whether it be the news, the media, we always need to fall back on biblical ethics and not societal ethics, because society's always going to mess you up. We will kind of move towards more business ethics, and then we're going to wind the class up looking at what about ethics in the church. A lot of different ethical things that you're going to face as a preacher, and some of them you need to know about beforehand. So if you have not turned in your paper, I need your paper. We got debates coming up, and Mr. Dan, what's your question?
Can you check your upload of the marriage ethics? That's the only one that you've uploaded that I haven't. It says it's missing text. Something to do with the text.
Okay.
I don't know. It's the only one of yours I've ever had trouble opening.
Yeah, the PowerPoint is not converting.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Okay.
I'm gonna go home. What version?
I'll say about reloading it, guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna go home. Brad, what version are you using? What version of PowerPoint?
08.